In the New Testament, there's works like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we call these the four Gospels, or the Gospel according to Mark, or the Gospel according to Matthew, or the Gospel according to Luke. But these aren't actually Gospels. These are bios. B-I-O-S. It's actually where we get the word biography from. It's basically the same word, bios and biography. One means life story, and one means life story that has been written down, but same thing. It was just implied that it was written down, or just known. Just like when you say, "Oh, I read that comic book," you don't have to say that. That it was written and drawn. You come to territory. But if somebody put a gun to your head and told you to point at where the gospel is in the New Testament, what, 2 to 4 pages contain the gospel. Well, there's the death, burial, and resurrection in the bios in the gospel according to Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Those characters, but you probably point to something like Galatians or Romans or maybe even Corinthians. But Romans really does present the gospel in a almost I don't want to say systematic way, but he really lays out what the Protestants call the plan of salvation. Basically, his view of Christ, God, and salvation, and I think it's wonderful. I also think it was he had to write that and show up in Rome because he got in trouble for what he said in his epistle to the Galatians, which I love the epistle to the Galatians. I like the fact that Paul was such a firebrand, that he was, manic depressant. I dig that about him. But yeah, that's the thing. The strange thing about the Gnostic Gospels is they don't really contain the gospel in there. I mean, the secret teachings that they're teaching aren't even contained in their scriptures. They're basically hidden oral traditions. They're not. Don't get me wrong. There was a faction of Gnostics that said, the gospel's clear, and it's, you can find it through knowledge, not hidden spiritual knowledge that's given to you by God, but actual knowledge. The knowledge may be secret, but it's only secret because you don't have eyes to see or ears to hear. But yeah, and they would cite Paul. And I always wonder, I go back and forth. 90% of the time I credit Paul with starting Gnosticism. Whether he intended to or not, I don't think he intended to. But he, I think he's the one at fault for starting Gnosticism, and especially Docetism, and then and Marcionism. And then 10% of the time I'm like, no, I don't think he did. But the 90% always wins out. But yeah, you read Paul and you go, oh my God. Imagine if somebody had the Epistle to the Galatians, 2 Corinthians, possibly 1 Corinthians. That's it. That's all they had. Oh, and they had Mark with the shorter ending. or they had part of John, part of the Gospel of John. You could very easily see how they would become a Marcionite or a Valentinian Gnostic. And keep in mind, Marcion grew up. I mean, Marcion, he became active in about 120 AD. So this is right after the apostles. And he was born and raised in northern Anatolia on the Black Sea. Northeastern Anatolia on the Black Sea. Right where Galatians was written to. And his father was a priest. And that was probably the only work of the New Testament that they had at that time. They might have had some works of some, maybe 2 Corinthians and 1 Corinthians, but that's about it. They probably didn't have a gospel, what we would call the Gospels. They probably didn't have one up there. So it's no wonder that Marcion turned out the way he did and believed as he believed. Because, I mean, imagine if you're raised on Galatians and 1 and 2 Corinthians. Yikes. The God that created the world, the God that is the God of the Israelites, the God of the Jews, is a stupid, ignorant taskmaster who is a bully with a whip who enforces the law, and the law, even though the law is good and necessary, he's way too strict and doesn't quite get it. And that's why, Christ came to correct all the nonsense that this demiurge was screwing up, and also the archons, because archons do get mentioned in the Pauline works. People tend to think thrones, dominions, principalities, powers, rulers, these things are categories of angels, and that's the innocent interpretation of it, but those are clearly archons. Thrones, dominions, powers, and it also lists angels. Remember, angels were part of the archons as well. So yeah, not to mention there's words like gnosis, pleroma, logos, Sophia, all throughout Paul, all throughout the New Testament, actually. Archon, Aeon. Yeah, it's not too hard to see why Marcion turned out the way he did. I feel bad for Marcion, but then again, Tertullian in Adverse Marcion, man, what a great rhetorician. I could read that all day long, just the way he rips into him, just how vicious Tertullian was. Such a badass with words. All right, peace to you.